They say in life you should never meet your heroes, and I'm actually interviewing one of mine. His name is Larry Cunningham, and he's my hero not just because he's a polymath, someone who straddles academic knowledge and basic common sense, someone who's a former professor, someone who's written or edited more than 50 books, including most famously the Essays of Warren Buffett, National Association of Corporate Directors Award winner. It's because in 2010 or 2011, Larry and I were on a panel in Washington, D.C. for the George Washington University. And honestly, I don't remember very much about that panel, Larry, but I remember how you made me feel. You were the nicest guy, and it really it stuck with me. And since that day, almost 15 years ago, I've tried not only to follow your work, but to be a little bit nicer, almost in the spirit of Larry Cunningham. So thank you first for that.
It's a pleasure, James. I'm delighted to see you. It's very kind of you to say those nice things about me.
Oh, you deserve all and then more. And we could make this whole interview about Larry's credentials, but in the interest of time, I'm going to keep it tight. So Larry, my first question here. We're here at the Markel annual meeting. And the Berkshire Hathaway meeting was not long ago in Omaha. Markel and Berkshire are really best-in-class companies at expending effort to put on a big event for their shareholder. It takes a lot of money, takes a lot of time, just mental energy. In the spirit of cultivating a tribe of long-term quality investing shareholders, can you explain, I'm guessing you believe that's worthwhile. Can you explain why?
Yes, you've described it very well. It's underappreciated, but very important for a company to have shareholders who understand that particular company and who will give management the runway they need to execute on the strategy.
Yep.
Not every shareholder is like that. There are short-term shareholders who are in and out. There are index funds who can't pay attention to particular companies. And then there's long-term focus kind, and they're really the best kind to enable managers the leeway they need and to listen and understand and support management when it needs it. And I think Berkshire Hathaway and Markel Group put a lot of effort into that because they recognize the value in it.
And I would almost add to that, I mean, if you don't mind, the idea of this minute-to-minute trading we have, I mean, it sometimes pulls us away psychologically from the raw reality that companies are companies. In the old days, before that, before we had that psychological distraction, we owned companies for the long run, and we discriminated against bad companies in favor of good companies, deprived bad guys of capital, gave it to good guys. And the stock market sometimes gives us too much psychological distance from that. So I guess in your spirit, this kind of brings it back. And you'd also mentioned Delaware law is a national treasure for a fairly similar reason. It gives companies that latitude, or company boards that latitude to do what they want versus some one-size prepackaged fits-all thing.
That's an excellent addition. The average holding period has shrunk from 7 years a couple decades ago to 7 months today. And it's hard for managers to execute on that kind of time frame. Most companies take at least 7 months to build something, and then another 7 months to sell it, another 7 months to collect it. If you have any degree of complexity in business, you're going to face some periods of challenge and then some periods of prosperity. So it's best to look over 5, 10 or more years if you can. So having shareholders that appreciate that is a big plus. And you're absolutely right on the analogy with Delaware. It's a very long-term state. They appreciate that each company's different, each situation, each board might need to be different, and so they give companies, managers, and shareholders leeway to tailor their business to suit their needs.
Awesome. Now, speaking of Berkshire again, without getting too deep into the stock market weeds, Berkshire trades for a PE of like 12-something, and Markel here is a PE of 8-something. Berkshire has outperformed Markel through most of recent history. If you had to pick a catalyst for something to change, is it Markel just getting more awareness or something else?
No, I think the sustained performance is obviously the ultimate inducement for attention, and the company is doing doing quite well in that regard, but it's just got to continue to execute for long periods of time. And then, of course, there is a piece of getting the word out and allowing, getting more long-term quality shareholders involved in the company. As you just saw at this meeting, a couple thousand people here in Richmond. So the word is getting out, but it's following a trajectory that's quite similar to the one that Berkshire was on, and following some of the same principles. So I think it's on a very good course, and I think the key is just delivering performance.
Yep, you're right. They can't argue with the truth. Switching gears, Larry, a few years ago, you espoused what seemed almost like an extreme position at the time, that companies should stick to their knitting and not just get involved, take a stand, and speak out on random causes that are not directly in the scope of their core business. Fast forward a couple of years, your position is no longer extreme. And companies are, in fact, moving very quickly towards your position. There's a Wall Street Journal article the other day, business leaders aim to sit out campaign, talking about how companies are specifically trying to avoid getting pulled into these sorts of debates. Have we swung back to a good place, or does the pendulum have still further to swing?
It's an excellent question, James, and thanks for the opportunity. I think the pendulum is swinging back to a sensible center where managers stick to their knitting, focus on the business, and don't get out of their lanes into the social and political debates of the day. They were enticed to do that for a variety of reasons, including COVID and movements like Me Too and Black Lives Matter. And I get the appeal of the activists, but I think CEOs don't have any particular expertise in those areas, and so I think they're right to be retreating from the public debates and try to stick to their business. Now, if a public debate happens to be exactly within their business, they should probably contribute to the public dialogue. But on many of these issues, it's not a central business point, and I think it's better. CEOs are better advised to stay out of it, and in any event, consult with their boards to figure out what is within their business and what isn't.
Yeah, one more note, and then one final question here. So I just noticed Tim O'Shaughnessy today, CEO of Graham Holdings, was mentioned in reference to a study of Gen Zs who were apparently much less patriotic, much less civic-minded than their predecessors. Accountability to the institutions that have made this country what it is for hundreds of years is a pretty important thing to get right. I think Tom Gaynor, the CEO of Markel, said, hey, I'm a little bit more optimistic. They'll probably kind of figure things out. And it seems to be the case, too, with some of the ESG. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of goodwill. Most people mean very well. They're just realizing, hey, it's a lot more complicated than we thought it was.
Yeah, Tim's very wise. I appreciate Tom's optimism, and I'm also reminded of an old saying that if you're young and you're not sort of liberal or progressive, then you don't have heart. If you're old and you're not sort of conservative and pragmatic, then you don't have intelligence. So I think there's a general tendency when we're younger to expect more from the world and not appreciate the limitations. And you learn over time that resources are limited and you have to balance it and adjust. And so I think we do eventually get it right, but I think we're still in a process here.
Wise words. Okay, last question. One word we've heard a fair bit, or phrase we've heard a fair bit today, is social inflation, which Tom Gaynor is using to represent, both today and in his annual letter, this notion of increased litigiousness and larger damage awards, and it raises the cost for insurance. And Buffett, I guess, expressed a similar sentiment or similar concern about Pacific Corp, which is a Berkshire Hathaway energy unit that's facing a big potential payout for some wildfire damages, and they're arguing utilities should not be the insurer for climate change risk. If social inflation is a problem, what is the solution?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I think the phrase social inflation was invented during the late 70s, early 80s, when judges especially recognized new theories of liability that exposed regular defendants and then their insurance backers to higher and higher settlements and verdicts, and that just increased the cost of running an insurance company, increased premiums. So that was called social inflation to distinguish it from old-fashioned economic inflation. And I think the general tendency of our civilization has been for social inflation to rise, to persist.
Yep. Every
Every once in a while, you'll get a period of deregulation and reduction and retrenchment, and we may be approaching a period like that. But when Warren Buffett speaks out about what's happening with that company in Utah and Nevada, and when Tom Gaynor references an annual report, legislatures and judges may begin to get the message and try to curtail it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, in California, you learned years ago, you can't bankrupt your utility. You can, but it's not a good thing to bankrupt your utility, right? I mean, the power goes out. Yeah, as someone, Larry, who did business with China for 10 years, where even if you are a victim, you get nothing. There's no incentive at all to be a victim, whereas here it's almost too much the other way. I mean, there's probably a happy medium. So if there's a young James Early or someone like me out there watching this saying, I like this guy, I want to know more about Larry Cunningham or follow him, where can that person go, Larry?
The best place to connect with me is on LinkedIn, social media. I'm leaning into social media. That happens to be my favorite one. I have a sort of regular appearance there. You can also get access to my newsletter on my LinkedIn site. So you just type in Lawrence Cunningham on LinkedIn, you should be able to get me.
Lawrence Cunningham, polymath, hero of James Early. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks to you guys for watching at home, too.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Larry. I really appreciate that. That was great. Awesome.